Hey everybody and welcome to another Lightroom quick edit. So today I'm going to take two raw files of a temple, I'm going to stitch it together into a panorama, and then I'm going to edit it from start to finish while showing you all of the adjustments as always, and I'm going to do all of that in just about 10 minutes. But first, this video is brought to you by Wix. Do you want to build your own professional and functional photography website or portfolio? Well, the Wix editor allows you to do all of that in a very quick and easy way. Check out the link in the video description and build your own website today. Okay, let's jump into Lightroom and get started with the editing. Now this is the raw file. I already stitched together the two panoramas just so there's more space on the top and bottom. And now what I'm going to do is just raise the shadows first of all, bring down the highlights. After that, I actually like to bring up the whites a little bit because bringing down the highlights by so much can kind of crush everything and make it kind of boring. And I'm also going to do the same with the blacks. Now that looks like a pretty good starting point. Clarity is a thing that I love to work with, but I'm actually going to go into the minus for the global picture because even though you see in some areas it looks really nice, overall I think it brings out the texture too much and it makes it too textury, which I don't like. Then vibrance and saturation, I don't want to go too far in either of these, but I think I'm just going to bring up the vibrance by about 10. And then also bring up the saturation by maybe kind of the same amount. Now contrast is something that I don't like to go too far to the right at all actually. Instead I also am going to bring that one to the left just so there's more option for fine-tuning later on. And I'm also going to change the color temperature to something slightly more cool. And while the reason I'm doing that is just so I can go down into the split tone and go into the highlights, go to this little box. And here I can just make sure that there are some warm tones only within the bright parts. So that adds a ton of different colors in your picture and a separation from shadow color to the highlight color, which is of course something you wouldn't get with just the regular color temperature slider. So I'm going to choose something a little bit dreamy here. I definitely do not want to go into the greens at all. Instead, I'd rather bring in a little bit further to the red tones and maybe bring it to like 40, 35 saturation, something like that. You really don't want to overdo it. And then I'm also going to go into the shadows. And I love to go into some kind of blue tones a lot of times, but I'm going to fine tune here as well. So yeah, I think I'm just going to go in a very pure kind of dark bluish tone and of course bring the saturation again to a more reasonable level. So this little split toning stuff, here's before, here's after, and maybe I went a little bit too far into the magenta and the kind of reddish tones with the highlights, but now I really like the look of that. So I'm going to go back to the color temperature, make it overall a little bit warmer, and maybe bring the tint just a little bit further to the left. So that's a great thing about Lightroom. You can just fine tune everything and play together and, use different adjustments and see how they work with one another. There's so many options. Now, going to the tonal curve, I like to bring up the lights just a little bit. That is so I can add dynamic and also bring down the darks a tiny bit, gives back some contrast. And you could also just go into the tonal curve and grab it and do it there, but I prefer the sliders. Now, in terms of the HSL tool, I'm gonna grab the hue little pinpointer right here, go over a red color, and just move up and down my actual mouse until I found a red color that works, or rather the red hue. And while I'm at it, I might also bring up some of that yellow hue, or rather the gold, and here in the saturation. And also with the luminance, I just want to bring down some of the green luminance so it's not quite as bright. With the luminance, you really have to be careful not to go too far. But I think that looks pretty alright so far. Now this to the left is before, here's after. I mean, it's not necessary to tell you anything. It looks completely different, much better already. But it also looks kind of dull and, it just needs some more lighting differentiation and vignetting and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is just skip all of the profile correction and detail because it's not about that, it's just about the general look. And I'm going to go down here into the effects to add some vignetting. Now this was shot at sunset and because of that, it's overall kind of a darker mood. And if you just bring up the color and the brightness and everything way up to the right, it becomes a little bit boring. So by adding some vignetting, you can bring back some of that mood. And you don't want to have like vignetting like that. That just looks absolutely terrible. But here, let's say -15, bring the midpoint a bit more towards the center, and also make the feather very smooth so it really blends into the picture. And you can see from before that vignetting to after, it really brings back some of that kind of evening and a little bit gloomy mood. And with that being said, I'm going to go into the local adjustments now. So all of the stuff that just adjusts a certain part of the picture rather than a global picture, which is what we've done right here so far. And the first thing I like to start out with is the graduated filters. Now, as you can see, the sky looks already pretty balanced. It's not too bright, but still I'm going to add a graduated filter over the top left. And I just want to bring down the highlights a little bit while bringing up the whites. And the reason for that is there are still some areas that are quite bright. I'm going to take off the clipped warning because I'm not too worried about some small areas. But by bringing down the highlights, you make it overall a bit less bright. But then by bringing up the whites, you bring back some of the dynamic. And as long as you balance it right, it can add a lot to your picture. Now, clarity is definitely not something I want in my sky as well. And the great thing about the newest version of Lightroom is that you can go to luminance in the range mask and then hold down the Alt key while you bring the left range slider to the right, and slowly it will deselect all of the areas that are just too dark to be selected. So that way you could even go like crazy into the minus exposure, and as you can see, it does a really good job at actually selecting that. So that looks alright in terms of that area of the sky. However, as you might notice, the whole picture just lacks some dynamics. So what I'm going to do is go over this area, and here I really don't want to affect like this part right here, just kind of the part above it, make a very soft feather, and just go into the plus exposure, plus whites, and yeah, okay, again, nothing with clarity at all. And I'm going to move it over here, so the entire sky almost seems a bit brighter. Now I'm going to bring on the highlight clipped warning, meaning any areas that are just complete white will be shown here. And I don't want that, so I might have to go back into the whites and just bring that down and just work with overall exposure. Yeah, I love this bluish tone, which is very light here, compared to the one to the right, which is very different. But I'm actually going to grab another graduated filter, and this time just with nothing except for the color hue, because I want to kind of make it even darker, so there's a really distinct differentiation from the top left being, you know, very light blue, going to the medium blue, going to the dark blue. And right now it looks very fake, so I'm going to bring it to a more reasonable level. And yeah, just kind of like that. You know, I could even grab another graduated filter and even angle it differently again, and this time also go further into the dark blues. That's what I love about Lightroom, and especially these local adjustments. There's just pretty much unlimited possibilities and unlimited ways to combine each one with another. So that looks pretty good. I'm actually going to go back into the global adjustments real quick and go into the transform. So here I'm going to go on auto. It doesn't really work, so I'm going to try level and go to guided. And here I'm going to drag a line across the horizontal line of this temple. And I'm also going to drag one across the vertical line. Now the reason I'm doing that is because the temple is kind of a little bit distorted. So by having that, it actually works a lot better. Maybe I have to bring it a bit more to the left, so it's not quite as far. Maybe even to the right. I mean, it's really about fine-tuning at this point. But as you can see, yeah, I think that actually looks pretty good. So let's just leave it there compared to off and like that. It's just a little bit more straight overall. I could certainly spend more time doing that. But I'm going to go back and grab another graduated filter, this time for the bottom. And I'm going to go and grab kind of an angled one, going to the minus exposure. And then that's all I'm going to do for that one, because I'm going to go and grab another one for the bottom left and go into the plus exposure slightly and bring up the whites. I just want to quickly show you before any graduated filters to after. As you can see, we really changed up the colors and especially the lighting scheme. So then I'm going to go and grab some rail filters for dodge and burning. I'm sure you know what dodge and burning is, but just in case you don't, it's just local areas to make either brighter or darker in a very small-ish filter. So for example, here I'm just going to add some plus exposure with plus whites, a little bit of minus clarity, and go over some areas that I think could use a bit more exposure, a little bit more differentiation, and just right click, duplicate. Maybe I could even add some warm tones and some magenta in there. There's so much opportunity, and the great thing is with these radio filters, you can just right click and duplicate them and add them over another area in the picture. So just right click, duplicate. Now I'm especially really keen on not going too far here, because as this temple is not facing the sun, if you go too far and make, just a spot super bright, it can look very unnatural fast. So you have to always worry about the whole lighting scheme. Don't just add a ton of filters. Always look at the picture, look at what looks natural, and then just enhance the lighting instead of adding something completely artificial and, something that doesn't work at all. For example, the left side, adding a lot of exposure works really well here because that's the side where the lighting and all of the sun is. And to the right, it would not work nearly as well to add as much. So I'm just going to right click, duplicate a little bit more, and I don't think there's too many opportunities for that here because it's already so dynamic and so different. So I'm just going to add a smaller filter over here, and I think that looks pretty good. So now, as always, I'm going to go into the minus exposure as well, and that is just important so there's some differentiation, not just everything is super bright. And the way I'm going to do that is actually by resetting everything and going to the minus exposure, minus shadows a bit, and even a tiny bit of minus blacks. And yeah, I think I'm even going to go into the magenta here as well. Then again, just right click, duplicate, and kind of go over some of the areas that are supposed to be black, or rather in the shadows, like this one right here. Right click, duplicate. And this really adds a type of contrast that there's no way you could get in other ways because it is so local and it doesn't affect the entire picture. So yeah, maybe here even, there's not too much need for it because it's not a super contrasty picture. It's a very soft lighting. So just maybe making something like that. I think that works pretty well. Now what I'm actually going to do as a final touch-up is go into the split toning and just bring down the whole saturation a tiny bit. And also in terms of the blues, I'm going to bring that to like 17 from 25. So with that being said though, I think the last thing I'm going to do is grab an adjustment brush and reset everything here except for the clarity. And as I said at the start, I kind of like clarity in some areas, but overall it just doesn't work. So that's why I like to grab this adjustment brush, just go over some areas right here, that really brings out the textures in some areas. And I don't want to go too far. Again, I'm even going to zoom in here so I can actually go over some of these detailed structures. Yeah, I think that's already pretty good. Now, I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see the difference, but this is before any of the custom clarity and this is after. And as a very last thing, I'm actually going to go down a little bit into the orange and also yellow saturation, just so the golden of the temple isn't super crazy. Oh, and also I'm going to just bring the contrast from like -20 to around -10. So there are certainly a lot more things that I could be doing, but I'm just gonna say that I'm done here. And if we look at the before and after, I mean, this is just a completely different picture. And I would actually recommend you to shoot HDR if you have such a contrasty scene, from the left, the temple being in shadow, very dark, and just the sun and the bright light behind it. If you have a RAW file from a decent camera, you can still make it work. But before I leave, I want to take another minute to talk about Wix. Now Wix, I talked about it at the start, it's a website building platform, but what makes them really unique is that there is so much flexibility in it. So whether you want a very basic portfolio website with just your best pictures, you want to have a few galleries, a few pages, you can do that super quick with their templates. And the best thing of that is that you can even host it and set it public for free forever. And then on the other side, if you're really demanding, you need a ton of sites and you want to upload hundreds, thousands of pictures, you need a store, you want to have appointments and all of that, then you can upgrade to the premium plan if you decide that you actually enjoy it. So anyways, check out the link in the video description below, build your own free website forever if you just need the basic thing. And even if you want to have a more ambitious site, you can just check it out for free and then upgrade if you like to do so. So that's been it for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'm gonna post a picture of this, by the way, on 500px so you can see the full resolution as well. Anyways, take care guys.